Thank you very much.
Bonsoir à tous.
Good afternoon to each and everyone. I'm honored to be invited to this conference in order to address you on the theme Environment and Citizen Participation. I am going to talk about the fundamentals of the Declaration of Rio on environment, the Declaration of 1992. And that declaration states that the best way of dealing with the issues of environment is to ensure the participation of all the citizens. So all the citizens drew or has drawn my attention on this definition. So I'm going to elaborate on the first part on what is that issue of environment, how it is transmitted on the field, and now to question all the citizens so that nobody can be set aside or left aside. So to collaborate with the citizen is a principle that was emerged in 1992, and it was passed like a law in some countries. The participation in some countries was on a basis of volunteers, but the participation is on the front, and in organizations like IOPD, ensuring the participation does not meet the requirements of all the methods, all the needs. So the issue of how is to collect data, how to include population to public issues, how to involve all of them in the process. So today in 30 minutes, I do not know how to answer all those questions, but I'm convinced with you. For me, taking into account the context, the cultures, identities, vulnerabilities, specific strength at the level of the public and the territories are part of issues of methods. So the theme is environment. The key challenge today, we are talking about the environment as the key challenge of our century. The conference is on the ODD 13 Sustainable Development Objective, SDGs, SDG 13 of fight against climate change. Because in order to have a sustainable development, we need these SDGs that come to fragilize the success of the whole other sets of the SDGs. And the impact of the climate has a daily repercussion on the daily living. So, in the face of the climate change and for the success of the sustainable development, we need to act in close collaboration, because there are some the carbon dioxide, less at times the greenhouse gases. We are on many years. So I'm introducing to you these SDGs 13 in line with the environment. So I'm taking time to show to you what we mean when we talk about climate change. So I'm not going to give you a lecture. I've used something visual on the report of IGEC. IGEC is the intergovernmental of the experts working on the climate. We do not have the expertise to do it right now, but I've prepared for you toolworks that can help you to understand the challenges of the climate change. So in the center part, we have the climate change as it is. What is the climate change? The climate change relates to greenhouse gas. It relates to greenhouse gas that we have abundantly in the atmosphere. So why do we have that greenhouse gas in excess in the atmosphere is because of all the human actions. What we need to know is that in less than 200 years, we moved from 1 billion people on Earth to 8 billion populations, inhabitants. So there is something to capture. And from 8 billion inhabitants on Earth currently, may I be helped please by the technicians? The last report of IGEC states the climate change is caused mainly by the human activities, the key activities, agriculture, industry, transportation, use of buildings. So the human activities are causing more greenhouse gases, and there is also deforestation. And Côte d'Ivoire is on the right place to talk about the impacts of deforestation in the country. So all those human activities are keys to explain that fact. On Earth, nothing is lost. Everything is transformed. So the carbon dioxide naturally present on Earth has 3 times carbon. We have trees. The carbon dioxide is a CO of trees, the one of the ocean and the one of the atmosphere. But since we human beings, we emit more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we reach to the point of the climate change. The effect of the climate change has 6 main impacts. What we realize all is the global warming, the warming of the ocean, the warming of the depths of the ocean. But for us, what we need to bear in mind is that we have 2 key impacts. The trouble of the term of the sediments and the increase of the warmth. That's what causes all the environmental impacts that we have in our daily life, as well as the biodiversity, health problem. We mentioned the issue of COVID-19 in the beginning of this conference. We have some risks with the climate change. It's not only COVID-19, but other viruses were freezed for 100 years, and with dilution of there was an issue, the remainder of the ice melting, and 4,000 queens died. So it's something that changed our landscape.
Bon, je suis peut-être un oiseau de mauvais augure, mais voilà, on risque d'en avoir
we may have other
qui s'appelleront pas pareil,
effects that may not be called the same way, but they will cause the same effect. So for us,
les problèmes, c'est la canicule,
the problem is the drought, the cyclone,
et les submersions.
And submersion. And finally, we have 2 key risks: the loss of resources in inland waters and the decrease of the products, commodities in agriculture.
Les 4 dernières cartes de cette fresque du climat,
what we also have to mention here is the consequences at the level of the human people. I've taken the time to present to you this phenomenon of the climate change because most of our decisions, our laws are based on this phenomenon, but few of us have a global understanding on what we call global change. So on the left we have the causes, and on the right we have the consequences. Now we are at the level of the cities. What is our focus is the environmental problems we have in the city. So when we take into account the elements causing the climate change, ultimately we come up with all the things that make works a city. It means that the transportation, the mobility, and the landscaping, the industry, is employment, production, consumption. The use of buildings is related to public works, the collectivities, and agriculture. It's related to food and the landscaping and also employment. So in order to make our city run, to think about developing a city, all our activities are causing climate change. And within a town, we also have all the consequences related on the environment as far as the climate change, the pollution of the soil, the pollution, noise pollution, resources in inland waters. Those are all the issues of sanitation. Biodiversity, the cities are destroying the habitats of the animals, and those species of animals are exposed to all the conditions of the cities that are not natural friendly. So the factors causing diseases because of climate change are affecting the people. So the theme of this conference, sustainable cities, territories, is questions to the SDGs 13, coming to putting in question the success of the other SDGs. The next slide is a bit violent, but in the environmental problems, I presented to you in the previous slide, I didn't talk about the waste, whereas the waste issues are our day-to-day problems. I have not deepened that issue because tomorrow we are going to address this issue on one panel, but I've just wanted to highlight, emphasize waste that it has even already has a severe consequence on our environment in Africa. I'm talking about the numeric, the digital waste. The digital waste are recycled. Most of them were going to China until China refused those waste of digital waste. The greatest garbage dump of numeric waste is close to us in Ghana in terms of infiltration, air pollution, etc. So, with regards to the COVID-19, the digitalization of the cities is something really important. The digitalization of Africa is a promise of development and sustainable development. We can see it, for instance, in Ghana, hosting all the greatest waste of digital waste. They are even hosting some drones in order to manage this issue. So the digitalization saves lives. Africa is using digitalization, so we need to include it in terms of management of the numeric waste currently compared to the other formula we have developed to manage those waste. Finally, the environment should be perceived in a way that we have three pillars: an item related to environment, the second to the social aspect, and the third at the level of economy. We need to find a balance between the human activities and the environment, and to think again about the way of consumption of human beings and how to live together. We were talking about biodiversity, we were talking about peaceful place of living. Without that place, we will have problems to live well. So, in order to have a sustainable place to live in, citizens are invited to be included. There are many ways of committing the citizens in the participation, but there are citizens who are not waiting for the institutions in order to be triggered to actions. I wanted to share with you a married Indian legend. I'm sorry for you to talk about a story. One day, said the legend, there was a tremendous fire bush. All the animals were terrified. They was powerless in observing the disaster. Only a bird was watching, was looking for some water with his beak to put it on the fire in order to quench it. And another animal tell him, "You bird, aren't you mad? It's not with the drops of water that you have in your beak that will quench the fire." And that bird told him, "I know, but I'm doing my part." So that little bird in that story represents the citizens, that we are all citizens. We are all citizens. So we need to act like this bird in that story. I want to share also the story of Yakuba Sawadogo, who also acted in that manner when he's more than 70 years. When he was a child, he used to see his parents using techniques in order to plant trees around his place that was facing drought. So he received less support, but when he was with his wall back against the wall, he remembered the actions of his parents, and he was applauded by the people. We also have this younger Greta Youngberg. When she was 11 years old, she went to sit down, saying that the adults people are doing nothing. Somebody should stick to that. Two colleagues of her came to her to support her, and today Greta Thunberg is received at the United Nations. I received somebody who said that Greta Thunberg caused a global movement. What do they have in common, Greta and Sawadogo? They have noticed something, they have a knowledge, and they want to act. But Colibri, that bird, is the one that acted alone, the hummingbird. So today the technique of Yakuba is recognized by some experts, and it has been registered by some experts, and even the UNESCO has adopted it. He was living in an arid place, a place affected by drought. We in Côte d'Ivoire, in the northern part, is faced with drought. Famine is coming, but we do not have this riches of transmission. How can we convert ourselves into Yakuba in order to fight against that catastrophe? Greta Thunberg gathered people, and I was delighted to see that on June the 4th, 2021, the International Committee of the Rights of the Children passed a resolution for the protection of the environment, which is going to become a right to the children. It will be on a legal base officially. It's also a tremendous responsibility for all the authorities in charge with the protection of the children. So these local actions are really important. So we need to know that we should act together. I want to change behaviors of people, and that's how we can trigger this change. We need to act locally and collectively at the same time. United we stand, divided we fall. So when we act together, we bring messages to the decision makers. We send some signals to our elected people, to the local authorities. They realize that what they are saying was not part of their plans, but they are adopting it. It's a kind of acting as a citizen. It's a quick response that gives influence, that triggers actions, that fosters incite the local authorities to influence the decisions of the citizens. So in the citizen participation, we create a kind of dynamism, because transition is an emergency and we need a maximum of commitment. Now, this transition, this protection of the environment incites me to say something to the local authorities, because this transition needs an accountancy. We've seen the activities of a commune cause greenhouse gas. So if we want to have a sustainable city, we need to know the purpose of what we are doing. All the reports on the climate states that the objective is not to displace 1.5 degrees excess by 2005. So we need to define an objective in order to reach 1.5 degree 2025. We should not exceed 2 tons per human being by 2050, by saying that in 2050 the population will be by 2 billions of inhabitants, 2 tons of carbon dioxide per year and per inhabitant. But it's higher. We could later give you some explanation about that. You have countries. I'm talking about France and Western Africa. When I'm in France, for instance, and I'm talking about problems related to sustainable cities, the address is that we need to reinvent our life without carbon dioxide. For instance, each citizen were emitting 10 tons per year. So now what's to be done is to decrease at all costs. But in Africa, it's the reverse, and it presents more intricacies. Today, African countries are far from 1 ton, 0.5 ton per year per habitant. We need to improve the quality of life of the inhabitants to develop those cities. We should keep in mind that I should not exceed 2 tons per inhabitant and per year. We are 2 steps from the COP26. Cote d'Ivoire is bringing its national input. I have not raised the details, but no matter what happens, we are working in order to save the planet. So, for a sustainable development, sustainable territory, we need to see how to think about our future in terms of system. A sustainable city can help us, can generate activities, some on the basis of agriculture. It should work on the agriculture done outside the soil and promote education and training in order to help our agricultural transformation, in order to have all the service. So that's what we should have as thoughts. When we talk about the citizen participation, we should help the citizens to work in a logical, the education should meet some complementary needs. I cannot elaborate more on the second example I scheduled to talk about, but for the citizen participation in the domain of environment, there is no recipe. I said every context is particular. However, there are some things that are fundamental. And what is fundamental for me is the awareness. I've taken 5-6 minutes to talk to you about the climate system. I hope that I have not been too quick and that it's been constructive and edifying for you. That awareness is really indispensable for me, because once we are aware of all those realities, we pay attention to our environment. And with respect to what I've just said, I navigating, making a trip before France and Africa, I want to let you know it's urgent to democratize the knowledge. We are in Côte d'Ivoire. At each ceremony, every birthdays, we are supposed to have new wrappers, new clothes. The textile industry is the most polluting with the cement industry. Once we know all those things, have we questioned ourselves the way we are celebrating, even if culturally it's part of our day-to-day life? I will give you other examples later. So this awareness for me is indispensable. It's key. Outside the awareness, we need to build the capacity of those who are in charge with initiating that participative democracy and also citizen participation. It's not something to improvise. We should not play it by ear. We need to understand environmental challenges and also understand the challenges of the participation, and along with the methods to use. And at the level of the local collectivities, I have an experience, the one of Cocody, where I was privileged to spend 1 year and a half. There is a key problem, the lack of competence, technical competence, in order to help implement the vision of the local authorities. The problem is not to have some technicians who are appointed without being able to choose or elect them. So this capacity building is true everywhere, but we need it here than elsewhere, because when we are in a commune like that of Cocody with many people, and in our organization charts, we have some people, but we do not know what to do. We have problems to put in place this citizen participation. We are in a difficult situation. So I insist on the aspect of capacity building. There is also another point, because I'm running out of time. Another key element is that in the environment, we all know the decision we are taking today has an impact in the long run. The citizen participation makes the citizen, in a way, somebody who is responsible for his future. The future is valued. What is worth is what will last. What has value is to be working or existing in the long run. But unfortunately, we may leave a certain number of people outside, marginalized, because many people in disfavored situation, unfortunately, we have many people of that kind all around the world, mainly in Africa, where we are. Those people have problems to think about the future. They are even in danger thinking about the COVID, because we saw it in the outbreak of COVID-19, because there was some provision for 3 days or more. I'm going quickly. Yet, those vulnerable people, those people living in precarious situation, are experts of life, carbon and transition. When I'm invited to citizen debates in France, people are wondering, asking some questions, and African people has the answers. I know what I mean on the basis of my experience. At times I say that Africa comes and help Europe to help Europe think about its life, its low carbon living. So there are things that are indispensable that we can see in the training in order to think about an inclusive transition. I've written to you some words, but there is something indispensable. In order to be inclusive, we need to be transparent. We need to give the rules of the games. I am participating, but how my viewpoint is going to be captured. What is important also
Et surtout pour les
is
personnes qui ont du mal à se
to
projeter dans le
think
futur,
about it. For
c'est
those who
de
have
pouvoir
problems, to
donner
have
des
forecast
termes concrets,
in the future, to give
de pouvoir
concrete
donner des
terms.
résultats tangibles, concrets. Ma question tout à l'heure,
You should
en
give
intervenant précédent,
tangible
sur l'économie
results.
sociale et solidaire,
On
c'est parce
the,
que je suis persuadée que l'économie sociale et solidaire
I'm sure that
est
the
un des
solidarity
leviers pour
in
aider la
economy is a
participation
leverage
citoyenne dans le
to
domaine de
trigger
l'environnement,
the citizen
citoyen
participation
crée
in
lui-même
environment,
des richesses
because the citizen
grâce à son
creates
engagement en faveur de l'environnement.
riches in the face of his commitment, face
Et il
to
y a deux travers
environment. There are
à
two
éviter
things that we
cette
need to avoid:
instrumentalisation
the
et les
instrumentalization
fausses promesses.
and the fake or false promise.
Certains disent,
Some
mais il y a
people
des
say
citoyens qu'on n'arrivera
there
jamais
are some
à faire
citizens
participer.
that we will never succeed in making them participate.
Mais j'avais envie de vous dire,
I'm a bit too
rien
long,
n'est impossible.
but I want to let you know
On
that
peut
nothing is
faire
impossible. Let's
participer
be
tous les
optimistic.
citoyens et
We
ne
can
laisser
include
personne en dehors
all
de la route.
the
Ça me permet
participants
d'affirmer,
and not
c'est
exclude
une expérience en Côte
anybody
d'Ivoire. Pas du tout dans le domaine
and
de
not exclude
l'environnement,
nobody.
mais dans le
So,
domaine de la justice.
in the
La
domaine of
des
justice of
mineurs. À
the
cette époque,
minor
j'étais
people,
consultante
when I was a
UNICEF, et
consultant
la
at
justice des mineurs de Côte d'Ivoire
UNICEF,
cherchait
the
son
justice
logo
of the minor people was looking
pour
for
symboliser
a logo to
sa
symbolize its direction.
Et avec la directrice,
And
il
with the
y a eu
director,
une démarche innovante.
there was
Elle
innovative
dit, moi, je veux
approach.
ce logo,
She
il
said, I
appartient
want
à
this
tous les
logo to
enfants
belong to all the
que je suis là
children
à protéger.
that I'm
Et donc,
assigned to
elle a fait
protect.
quelque chose
So she
d'extraordinaire.
did something
Elle a lancé une
extraordinary.
participation
She launched
de tous les
a
enfants
participation
sous
of all the
l'injustice
children
incarcérés en Côte d'Ivoire.
related to
grand
the
challenge.
incarcerated justice in Côte d'Ivoire.
Trouver
It
le
was a
logo
key
de la
challenge
justice des mineurs.
to find
Mais ce
the logo of the
faisant,
justice
elle
of
a
the children.
invité, elle a
But
donné
while doing so,
l'occasion
she gave
à tous les enfants
the
sous
opportunity
l'injustice de réfléchir
to
à
all the
qu'est-ce
children
que
to
c'est que
think
la
about
justice.
what
Et non
does
plus
justice
simplement de
mean,
dire, ouais, de toute façon,
and not
ils
to
nous ont
say,
pris, on les
just
aime pas. Non.
they have just put
C'est
us in
qu'est-ce que c'est la
jail,
justice.
we don't
Et
care
à
about
la
that.
fin,
So we need to know what
celui qui
justice
gagnait,
is.
on
And in the
l'accompagnait,
end, the one
remise
who
de
was
peine
winning
dans un projet professionnel.
was given a prize and he was
Voilà
inserted in a professional
Le logo de
activity.
la justice des mineurs,
So this
qui a
is the
été
logo
fait
of the
de façon
justice of the
complètement
minor people
participative. Et
that's
le
been
parapluie, c'est justement
inclusive
l'aboutissement de la
participative,
réflexion de ce
and,
jeune qui disait, mais finalement,
it's
la justice, elle est là, et
to say that
protège.
justice is here
J'ai eu
and
l'honneur de
justice
faire
is
partie du
protecting
jury,
us.
et ensuite, on
I've
a
been
appelé un
honored
graphiste
to be part
pour pouvoir
of the
l'intégrer aux lettres de la DPG.
jurist.
Donc laisser quelqu'un en bord de la
So
route, alors que la
leaving
justice
somebody aside,
réussit à le faire,
whereas justice
en
is
cas
succeeded in
d'incarcération,
doing it
je pense qu'on peut
in
tous le
prison,
faire.
I think that we can all do it.
Enfin,
At last,
puisque le développement durable
since sustainable
répond aux
development
besoins du présent
meets
sans
the needs of the
compromettre les
present
générations futures à
without
répondre
jeopardizing
moi,
the future.
qui au début de ma carrière
In the beginning of my
était
career,
militante pour les
I
droits
was
des enfants,
children rights activist, I would last my presentation by saying,
faisons en sorte que la
let's do
participation
things
dans
in
l'intérêt
such a
général
way
et
that the
la protection de
participation
l'environnement
in general
fasse partie
interests
de la
can be
réalité.
part
Nous,
of the
adultes, nous devons
DNA.
réinventer
We adults, we should reinvent
les
our life
éduquons avec
if
les
we
valeurs du vivant, avec les
we
valeurs de la
raise them with the values of
dans l'intérêt
participation,
général,
of
avec la valeur
a
de
general
la protection de
interaction
l'environnement.
with the value of the
Ils
protection of
n'auront pas de
environment.
questions à se poser, ça va
They
être
will not have
là où
question
nous,
to
on a
ask
des
themselves.
difficultés. Donc j'ai réinterprété
So
une
I
phrase de Gandhi
reinterpreted
qui dit, soyez le changement
saying
que vous
of
voulez voir dans
Gandhi,
le monde.
be the change
Ma conclusion,
of
c'est
the change you want to see in the
soyons le
world.
changement
My
que nous
conclusion,
voulons voir
let's
dans le
be
monde.
the change that we want to see in our world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci. Il nous reste encore quelques minutes.
Thank you very much. We still have some questions. Let me say 20 minutes for some contributions and then some questions. I recall to you that just after this conference that has been presented by Mrs. Konan, we'll have a coffee break of 10 or 15 minutes in order to take a break, and we are going to deal with the two last conference, the one on the right to the city and the last on the governance and participative democracy. Microphone, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I would like to simply say something that given that it is a theme that is quite important when it comes to environment, it is important that the presidents of regions and the mayors have a protocol from the MOU from the government that will allow the mayor and the president of the region to comply with it. The mayor, Jean-Marc Yassé, you have the floor.
Mademoiselle, par ici, s'il vous plaît.
Please, can you help us out here? In fact, I don't really have questions. As he said that we should have a book of specification from the government. I think no, we shouldn't say that, because if you've been elected, you know what you want to do for your population. So why are we going to have a book of specification from someone that is going to dictate what you're supposed to do? So I think that when you've decided to do something, you know where you're going. So the book of specification, you can do it with your colleagues and your citizens. So this is my say on this. No. So we're here to have some exchanges, so we can continue on this topic. So I have something to say about what we just discussed. I think there is a green fund for the climate. Recently in Senegal, there was a mission that has been committed by the government to remove the constraints that were preventing the territorial collectivity to apply for the green fund for the climate to face the climate change. So as long as life on Earth will be based on the immediate environment, definitely human beings will live. I agree with Madame when we say that we should invest in our children. It is with our children that we can expect the change of behaviors. So here we can all commit territorial collectivity and government all together. We can act. So what I think is that the governments should know what they need, what they want, or they should either choose the decentralization process, and they should also provide the funds, the means, or we should decide to transfer the difficulties and inform the territorial collectivity to do what they're supposed to do. So it is very important that we get to this point, and that definitely, I think the speaker said it, we should have definite solutions to consider the care for, to work on the environment issues. Because we're saying that sometimes we are preventing the citizens who live within the forest to use the wood for their livelihoods. So it's not normal. I said in a conference in Tabadunga, I said that in general they use the wood, but not for the food, but they sell the charcoal to get money in order to have enough money to live. So we need to operate definite choices. So we should stop going back and forth, because we were under the impression that there were some, like the government and the collectivity work separately, but we should know that we should all work together. We have to understand that we need to invest in our children, because this situation is for the future. Thank you so much for this presentation. I have a question about the preference, because she said that Africa needs to have something to offer, and we are really happy about that. I want to know that if the local preference will not reverse the trend. I'm saying that because unfortunately we see that our youth like what comes from abroad. There are some youth that prefer to wear a jersey from Real of Madrid. I have nothing to do. I have nothing wrong about that, about Real of Madrid, rather than wearing the jersey of the team from Côte d'Ivoire. So if we have a football team in Odine in the north of Côte d'Ivoire, instead of supporting this team, we'd rather give our support to a team that is abroad. So when we're talking about local preference, instead of consuming palm wine, we prefer a wine coming from France. So my question is, if we promote more local preference, I think this will help one way or the other to help this youth to get in this right direction, as she just said. So we allow the speaker to say something about that before we take another question. So I just would like to say something about the two speakers before me. The one that's saying that population are forced to use firewood to make charcoal, sell it in order to have some earnings. There's something that is quite interesting for the climate. It is methanization. So I was speaking about the waste issues in Africa. So regarding the waste, methane is greenhouse gas that has heating power that is 28 times higher than carbon dioxide. So methane is the degradation of natural waste deprived from oxygen. So methanization happens wherever there are wastes with organic matters. So this methanization, this methane can create explosion when it gets in the atmosphere and provides and creates a greenhouse gas, or it will create, we can use it as a biogas and it will become energy. So there is a potential in terms of energy with all the organic waste that we have in Côte d'Ivoire. Later on top of that, we had a national strategy that was discussed to work against greenhouse gas due to the fact of deforestation with what we call payment for environmental services. So keeping trees and making plantings in order to have an area that can be considered as a forest can help a farmer to make some earnings. So I think there are other solutions, but simply what we need to say is that we should help the citizen with research and development. They cannot have standalone solution, but we can help them with the research and development. On the last question, I 400,000% agree with you, sir. I am both African and European origin, but I was raised in Europe. So when I came, the first time I came in Africa was when I was 16, and I was really happy with the craft and everything. So I was really transformed because of what I've seen. And my father was just laughing at me because he considered me to be like a little white lady. You know, people here in Africa, they don't really like what comes from Africa. They prefer what comes from abroad. So what I think is we should value what is local. In France, we value what is local, and even the salt. We are saying in France that we have to buy locally, but all the inputs to manufacture soap, such as butter, comes from Africa, right? So as long as we value what comes from another country, we won't see the value that we have here. So I totally agree with you
pour la planète.
because all of that will save carbon dioxide for the planet.
D'accord, dans le fond, rapidement.
Okay, quickly. Good afternoon to you all. I'm Mr. Zachary, and I work in an embassy, the embassy of South Africa, of Netherlands. So I want to share a story with you. I was the neighbor of Sir, who is now a mayor. He was working, but as soon as he became a mayor, he bought a 4x4, and later on he bought a very big car. So this raised my attention on the management issue of the different collectivities. Are we well as representative of the managers of collectivities, are we aware of the environment issues? Because I'm working for a country where the Ministry of Justice use bike to move. Is it possible to see it here, especially in Côte d'Ivoire? So this question, it's a question that you just put in. So let him go forward. So the first day I went to Netherlands, I was working for Netherlands. When they came here to take me at the airport, the director of an international organization came with the bike to take me from the airport. I was very shocked, but later on I realized that they are at a higher level of education. How can we today change the mentality, our perception of the carbon? Thank you very much.
Vous venez ici, rapidement. Madame Dakonan, vous voulez peut-être...
Mrs. Dakonan, can you give answer to that question?
Effectivement, monsieur.
Yes, really, what's going on in Netherlands is something that is very, very funny, marvelous, because if we can use it here, it would have been very interesting. Because there's a sir who always go to the conferences wearing a cask for the bike. But if we can implement it here, but in any life, for example, in France, I always have a bike in France, but here in Côte d'Ivoire, I can't use the bike because I don't want to die. So even if because of the carbon, we have to maybe prioritize the bike, but bicycle, we should before that start creating roads for the bicycles, and later on maybe we can think about using bicycles.
Monsieur Dalé Oyulu Alexis.
To Mr. Daru Alexis, the one in charge of the NGO Green Holidays. So you started the conference with the declaration of IO, but I want to take you back to the Stockholm Declaration. So the man has a fundamental right to equality, to suitable living standards in a good environment of quality, which makes him live with dignity and welfare. So conscious that a good environment is a source of success, and also conscious of that the human beings here in Cocody, we say Cocody Green City. Cocody Green City, without the participation of the population, the city is green. It's fundamentally green, but without the participation of our children from the kindergarten up to university, the child doesn't know how the city is green, because there are people who are just
contrat signé.
engaged by some contract that are signed. These are the companies who make the companies green. So the child will just realize that the city is green, but he will not exactly know how come that this city has become green. He doesn't know how the tick is done. This is how we initiated Cocody Green Holidays. So the different teak trees that you can see at the technical school have been done by this NGO. So we are those who realized this project with the headmaster of this school. So we are saying that if we want our country, Côte d'Ivoire, to become more green, it will be interesting that it becomes a national program. Because as you said, for being conscious, for this conscious you mentioned, for it to be very effective, it must be from primary school. The child should know exactly what is the seed of the teak tree. So this child should be educated about that. He should know that it comes from a seed. You gave the example of Burkina Faso, where they have already experienced this. So how can we also recover this forestry environment if we want to go easily to, if we can easily contribute to the country to become green? It will be more interesting instead of only using some companies who will come to exploit the trees, who are destroying the forest. So they are making profit, but at the end, when a tree of 100 years is exploited just for it to be used, this means that we need a problem of awareness raising. So the city of Cocody, as we call it, the green city, as national, the Ministry of National Education should have a syllabus which will take into consideration the deforestation in his program. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I would like to commend you for the quality of your presentation. We learned a lot this afternoon. I want to give you an example. I'm the mayor of a small town close to Abidjan, which has a pressure these days. About 5 to 6 years, our residents had rubber farms. But today we're also suffering a very overpopulation coming from Abidjan, which increased the price of the square kilometers. So if we want to convince our population to maintain the agriculture activities to provide food for the people in Abidjan, we should find other arguments to convince them, because the sustainable development also take into consideration the different needs of the population today and also the needs of the population tomorrow. But today, it's very difficult to convince the people here in Abidjan. For someone who has today a profit of 200,000 or 300,000 CFA, to ask him to continue doing food. So it will be difficult for him to accept that. As you said, all the energy programs that you
On a l'impression qu'il y a un gros bouillonnement intellectuel.
Okay, so because as we realize, we can see that we have many discussion on going at the international level, at national level. So there's all the strategies. I agree almost with my brother in Kokodi, and I also agree with Abraham, who is saying that from the national strategy, we should find some local strategies. It will be interesting because it's not someone who will maybe do something of 500 square kilometers who will impact the national strategy, but also close to this national strategy, we should have our own strategy. We should not wait for the funders to tell us that we have to make some studies, but we should tell those who are doing the rubber farms to also have the necessary funding for him to also decide to do different things, but we should give him the means. So in the global economic strategy, which govern the environment also, we should also tell the Africans, because we Africans, we are very late in terms of the production of carbon. So we should tell them that they have the capacity, that they can benefit from the support, which will help them to make some studies, and also which will help them to maintain some green coverage for them to also benefit from all these elements. So it's important to find some funds for those who are landowners, because if he is a landowner, what it will be done to him will be his land. So at the level of the state, they should find some strategies to convince the different collectivities, as I said, to have some book of specification which can be taught at the national level, and how they will also accompany this strategy, so that the people who will benefit from these different investments will also think about tomorrow.
Just a second, last concern, and we will go for the coffee break. My name is Mr. Yaya, Deputy Mayor of the Commune of Korogo. As you said early on, I retained one of your citations. And the mayor continued saying that we had to put on the implementation book, and I agree. And the question I would like to ask is, when, as elect, you have a project and you're convinced of the impact, the positive impact of the project for the population and the locality that you are managing, and you also have an opposition coming from the population, what do you do? This is the question I'm asking. We had two examples. When we were elected, the mayor brought an investor to build a station, and there was an opposition coming from the population, and they were not ready for this planting. And we tried explaining everything to them, but then they categorically refused, and the investors went back. So I believe that was a loss for the municipality. And the second example, and this is at the cultural level, we initiated an operation about blood giving, and we nearly lost our lives in this. And people began asking, what will you do with our blood?
Je suis médecin de formation,
I'm a doctor.
mais j'ai dû expliquer en
I had to
expliquer
explain in details. I took examples that when you go to hospitals and you are given blood, this
tout le monde était ébahi.
people were surprised. People thought that the blood was being fabricated. It is when you donate blood, and when next somebody needs blood, that's when it is used. But in a locality of about 70,000 people, we had only 14 people, 14 donors of blood. So I'm asking, indeed we are working on the implementation book, and if you know that you have a project and this is a good one for the population, how do you go about it?
La RDC rapidement.
DRC, quickly, very last question, Mrs. Daphna, before you conclude.
Allez-y.
Go ahead.
Merci, madame.
Thank you, madam. Mr. Henri Christel Logenja from DRC. I just have three concerns. I'll go straight to the point because I was very curious when you compared the effect in terms of tones. When you are comparing France and Africa, in Africa we have to manage not to reach the level of tones, whereas in Europe they have to reduce it drastically. Shortly, your predecessor, I don't know if it is Mr. Niamey, when he was talking, he said territories do not have access to the green funds. What do you think about this idea? I don't see Chief Bassi with us. I saw him during the break. Can't we think of a solidarity fund for climate justice, for especially those territories which are polluting, for them to deduct something to support the African countries facing climate issues. Second concern, you talked about accounting. I don't know which accounting. Is it economic responsibility or environmental? I don't know. And then you talked about a condition for a sustainable city. You said that we had to fight against urban extension and making our soil artificial. But it's good, but we have realities in Africa. For urban areas to extend, it is because the condition of these facilities are not very good. That's why the urban are bad. That's why the urban areas are coming to the cities. People have electricity, they have cars to travel. So when they come to cities, they settle. Unfortunately, our cities do not have urban management plans with basic social services well functioning. That's why we see slums and these dirty areas. So if we have to stop extending our urban areas, what will be the strategy to stop these urban exodus, to maintain these rural populations in their localities? If you can respond, I know some of the questions are going beyond the scope of this conference. Nevertheless, in the SDGs, we have SDG 17. I'll try to give you a comprehensive answer. We have SDG 17, which is aiming at allowing states to cooperate, and within this SDG 17 and 13, we have this climate justice dimension, meaning that the most industrialized countries which are
d'accompagner par une aide
which are
financière internationale
contributing to this climate change should help the countries which are not polluting as they pollute, financially. And this is why we have the Green Fund. Maybe local governments cannot have access to it, but I think this is why I was saying that this is a systemic thinking that we have to carry out for environment, and these green funds are passionate and very connected to the solidarity economy, because citizen initiatives can in favor of the promotion of local economy can be funded by these green funds if only they are able to demonstrate their impact. And to demonstrate your impact is sustainable development, within which we find three pillars: environmental, social, and economic. And this solidarity economy is a levy which can make this climate challenge an opportunity for the youth, African youth, especially to become its own employer by mobilizing green fund and also allocating and also solving social issues in rural areas. Because if we call it green fund, we have the three pillars: economy, social, and environmental. So we can deal with this issue which is leading to urban exodus by requesting a green fund, because that is ecological transition. This is why we cannot say I'm in a business to protect the environment or the planet. This is just a statement in the air. Where is the evidence that you are doing it? That the evidence is in the carbon account. For example, you have a project, you maybe want to establish a small unit for waste management, which will definitely deal with the waste at a point. We have an instrument which is helping to count the carbon that you're going to save, and that is what we call carbon economy. And you also have some instrument to assess the social impact of your action. So to me, the local government development is absolutely connected with the citizen participation in the framework of environment protection. Now, with regard to your city, cashew was farm, on a household base. It was a way for you to no, that was rubber tree. This was then, but it is no longer responding. This was not a response to the mayor, who said that you need to assess thoroughly your area, because selling your lands in exchange of X millions may not be profitable, in comparison with farming or developing an activity. So the gentleman said it, we have to promote the land. That is it. I am not trying to address all the answers, but I tried. Ovation for Monsieur